Welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. My name is Conrad Weaver. I'm so glad you decided to join us today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and watching this program. This is episode number 79. Yes, we're only one away from 80. So excited to be here. And we have a good one today. It's my look back at my live interview with Jeremy Wade that we had this past week. And we're just going to put the whole thing out here for you to listen to and to watch. And if you joined us live, I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. But if you didn't, here it is. It's the whole interview with Jeremy Wade and the conversation we had about what it means to live out your faith within the first responder community on duty and what that looks like. And Jeremy dives into where God led him on his journey from going from law enforcement into running this nonprofit, this organization to bring people together within the faith community. So stay tuned for this challenging and important conversation. Hey, if you are a first-time listener, I welcome you to the show. I welcome you to this platform where we bring content to help you as a first responder, to help you grow as a human being, grow as a person, and to better take care of yourself. That's really my mission, because wellness is not optional. And if we want to be successful at what we do as a human being, as a professional, in whatever industry you're in, whether you're a first responder or whether you're a business leader or whether you bag groceries at the local grocery store, we want you to grow and develop yourself into the kind of person that is successful, that is healthy, that is well, and with today's conversation, to be successful in your spiritual life as well. Hey, just a quick side note here. If you are a regular listener and you have listened to the podcast for a long time and you have not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And if you could do me one more favor, go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a review, 5 stars if you believe it's worth it. I really appreciate that. And now here's the conversation I had with Jeremy Wade. Jeremy, glad to see you. Saw you a little round blob on the screen a few minutes ago, but glad to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Conrad. Thanks. A couple technical difficulties, but yeah, I just love the opportunity to join you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for the people who don't know who you are, give us the cliff notes of who is Jeremy Wade?
Yeah. Jeremy Wade, I'm born and raised in the Seattle area. Worked for the Seattle Police Department for 13 years. And then 3.5 years ago, God redirected my paths. My family and I moved to Cleveland, Tennessee. Felt that the Lord was calling us to take a step in faith, step out into faith and into full-time ministry, serving first responders nationwide. We started the nonprofit Mission First Alliance just 2 years ago, which is a national gospel-focused first responder alliance bringing together organizations and chaplains and churches and first responders all together for a greater kingdom impact. And really just, again, a short version of my story. It was really my story and what got impressed upon me for years that led us down this path. My faith was important to me. When I got hired in the Seattle Police Department at 26 years old in 2008, but it took me over 2 years before I met another Christian in the department, the largest department in the state. And after some critical incidents in my first couple of years, working a shift that I couldn't go to church very often, I, looking back, just can recognize that I fully embraced the identity in law enforcement. I loved everything about the job. I had a lot of challenges, but I just doubled down and loved it. But I, 2 years in, recognized I was not the man of God I wanted to be, not the husband, not the father, not who I wanted to be. And the Lord just captured my heart, recommitted my life to the Lord. But even from that point, it was still difficult. I still didn't have any examples to follow. I had a veteran officer in my squad around that same time challenging me and saying that he didn't think you could be a Christian and a cop. Mm-hmm. And I replied, fortunately, from the Lord's prompting, I don't know how you could be a cop and not be a Christian and still have hope for what you see and what you deal with. And still faced discouragement when I reached out to our department chaplain of 38 years, who was more discouraging than encouraging me, couldn't connect me with others. I started trying to search for Christian law enforcement resources nationwide, and I struggled to find any. And again, this was just a long journey, 10 plus years of the Lord growing me and the Lord putting people around me and recognizing that there are a lot of resources out there, but most first responders and their family members don't know that they exist. And then many of them aren't working together either. So that's why we started this alliance.
Hmm. Well, I have a lot of questions, and I want to kind of first kind of address the thing that maybe some of the people may be asking. As law enforcement, you guys see the worst of the worst every single day. It's all you do is respond to bad stuff, and you have seen just a humanity that is inhumane in a lot of ways. So a little devil's advocate here. How can God allow these things, and that you see every single day? What do you say to that? How do you respond to that? How can you trust a God who allows these things to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think that that is a point of tension for a lot of people that become first responders. I think you kind of have this idea, everyone gets into it with good intentions, go out and make a difference and impact their community and, serve, people and help people on their worst days. And you do have those opportunities. But many times you don't see the impacts. You don't see the long-term impacts. You don't see, the good that comes out of it. You're just there on people's worst days over and over and over again. And it really does start to change your worldview. I mean, very quickly you can see, men and women just become negative and jaded and just brought down by the pressures of the job. And so I do think that it is something that people do have to wrestle with. And I don't think it's an easy answer. It's easy, for someone that hasn't been in those situations to say, oh, just trust God, and just the little platitudes. But really, it's something to really wrestle with. But for me and my perspective, when I have placed my trust in God, when I am walking with the Lord, it changes everything in your life. It changes the peace you have in your life in the midst of chaos. It changes the purpose and why you do what you do, and it changes your perspective. It's not a perspective of a here and now and in this moment and in this time, and all I see is this terrible situation. It's God is working a master plan and weaving so much more than we can ever see or understand. And there is eternity in mind. It's not just here and now and my health, wealth, and prosperity, for, here and happiness. It's God has got a bigger picture. God has got a bigger plan, and there still is hope, and there always is hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's more than just a religious thing that you do, going to church and singing the hymns, and it's much more than that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a deep relationship. I think that as I was growing in my faith and God was growing me, in the midst of it, still working in Seattle, still, working the streets, still working in patrol, just to grow. What does it mean to actually live out your faith? And I think at around that 28 years old, even though I grew up in the church, I had no idea. And really, until I surrendered my life to the Lord and started learning what it looked like, in a John 15 to abide in Christ and stay connected to him and stay connected to the vine. And apart from him, you can do nothing. Learning what it means to abide, which is a surrender and a dependence and a connectedness on a daily basis to the Lord. Like, without understanding that, then it's just, yes, like you said, just a religious thing that you do on Sundays, which that's not God's intention. If you read the Bible, that's not what he wants or requires from those that follow him.
Yeah. So in your experience, when I know from talking to you in the past and having you on the podcast, last year, a couple of years ago, you talked about really helping to grow the the ministry there through the Seattle Police Department as far as the chaplaincy program. What happened with that, and how did that grow? What were the results of that?
Yeah, it was so cool to see what God did. Where for the first 2 years, I didn't know any Christian officers. I reached out to that chaplain. I said, I feel like God's impressing upon me to try to start a Bible study. I said, if you can invite anyone, I'd love it. You can come when you're available. I said, I'm just going to do this weekly. I committed to doing it weekly, and more than half that time in that first year, I sat in a parking lot by myself because no one showed up. But over the year, there were a few that started to come. The word did get out. I did start coming alongside that chaplain and just volunteering and helping him in whatever ways I could. A couple years later, he suddenly unexpectedly passed away. 38 years plus with the department, no succession plan in place, even though there was a Seattle Police Chaplain Association nonprofit. And from there, I had the opportunity just to raise my hand and say, here, I'm available, not to necessarily be the chaplain, but for that nonprofit that had a solid board, but didn't have anyone available. So they allowed me to go through a week-long police and fire chaplains training academy to learn what it is to be a chaplain. I was able to hire the next chaplain. I was able to be the executive director for the next 8 years. And then God just kept snowballing things. And that's where I think for any first responder that is challenged to live out their faith, I think that it's perseverance. It's perseverance in their faith. It's prioritizing their faith. And it's perseverance in trying to live it out, because I've talked to first responders, police and fire all over the country, many of them, even in the Bible Belt of Tennessee, that feel like they're the only Christian in their department. So I think it just does take perseverance to live out your faith, and it takes a courage and it takes a boldness. And it was just cool to see what God did over the years for me doing the Bible studies and getting involved in some of the ministries like the Navigators first responder ministry, and learning what it means to disciple and discipleship. And when I left the department in 2021, there was over 50 officers that I was regularly doing retreats with and Bible studies with and discipling and encouraging. And the chaplains program continued to grow and continued to be intertwined. And again, God just went before me, where one of the positions that I really had a desire to serve in was to be a peer support coordinator. And we had 2 full-time peer support coordinators in the Seattle Police Department. And one of them, as he was retiring, tapped me on the shoulder and just said that he thought that I would be amazing to fill his role once he retired. And we started the conversations and, had an interview, and ultimately was able to serve in that position for the last 5 years I was on the department. So to be able to integrate the chaplains program into our peer support, which then led to resilience and wellness in service training for the whole department, which then led to, in 2020, starting a wellness unit for the department right before COVID and the riots hit. So again, it was just cool to see God orchestrating it all and directing the paths, and all these pieces are just so intertwined, where I believe, and especially from my perspective, faith is such an important piece of it, when it comes to wellness and resilience and all that. And the last thing I would just add, even for this conversation, I love seeing the wellness growing and the support growing for first responders. But the thing that I was still seeing that was lacking in the Seattle area for the wellness efforts and across the country was this spiritual aspect. It's easy to talk about I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easier to talk about the critical incidents, and the traumas, and what could we do, and how do we support each other, and what resources are out there and available. But I feel like there's a whole nother layer of courage and a gap of kind of culturally competent, like we say, culturally competent for therapists and mental health support, but culturally competent for spiritual support. And that it's not just the chaplain's role. And many chaplains are focused on the community or other aspects. They're not focused on the officers and their family members, or they're just falling short in what they could be offering. So God just kept growing that burden for me, just to say, Jesus is needed, Jesus is a part of the equation in terms of wellness and support. And even psychologists recognize that spirituality is a component of resilience, but it's just difficult for it to be trained. And so many departments and the separation of church and state and whose role is it and all that. And to all that, it just felt like it was getting pushed out. And the vast majority of the support offered to first responders and family members is good, but lacking in that spiritual support.
So let's go back to when you first, what in your words said, you really recommitted you in your faith journey. How did that experience and that decision, how did that change the way you saw policing? How did that change the way you did your work as a police officer?
Yeah, I feel like it changed everything. Like even 2 years in, I could already tell the job was changing me. And it's like you hear everything when you first start. And even when I was going through in 2008 in the academy, you're given the book from Kevin Gilmartin, The Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, and heard some of the warnings of divorce rates and traumas and suicides and things like that. But I feel like it still went in one year and out the other year, because until you're really doing the job, you don't know what you don't know. And even 2 years in, I could see that it was changing my outlook, my, just negativity and just how I viewed things. But once I recommitted my life to the Lord, everything changed. Like my perspective changed. I had so much more peace. I had so much more joy. I had so much more purpose in what I was doing. And my eyes were opened in a new way to the situations and the calls that I was on. It was a few years after that where I was working with a patrol partner, working the night shift, and we responded to a house twice in the same week for two little girls. The grandparents were caring for them because the parents were in jail, and you could tell the grandparents were doing the best that they could, but they were just lacking in the means. So a two-bedroom apartment, there was not a single piece of furniture in the entire place.
Wow.
And both calls that we went in that same week were in the middle of the night, 12-year-old girl, 6-year-old girl, and there was just always issues in the night. And the 6-year-old girl sleeping on the floor with the blanket, the 12-year-old girl not wanting to go to sleep. And we could just see that the issues were there at night. The second time that we were called to that house, the 12-year-old girl was attempting suicide.
Wow.
We got the mental health support that she needed. We were able to get her to the hospital. But again, my partner, I still walked away feeling like what they needed was a space of their own. They needed some beds. They needed something. We couldn't think of any community resources. So my partner and I actually went out and bought them 2 beds and bedding and stuffed animals and just everything for the room, and just asked, can we, set these up for the girls? Just want to gift these. And did that just on our own, and walked away feeling like, how many other situations do we, go into homes like that where there's kids that are being cared for? It's not neglect. It's not abuse. There's no reason to remove those, kids from the home, but they're still lacking in the things that we just take for granted that most kids have. And so we started through the Seattle Police Foundation nonprofit a Seattle Police Beds for Kids program. And over 4 years, we were able to donate 1,100 brand new beds to kids that didn't have a bed of their own. So it's like God just started like opening up our eyes, and there's like I could go on and on telling stories of just times where I was able to slow down and look at things through a different perspective of either those that I was arresting or those that I was serving in the community. Like, again, it's so easy for those that you're arresting over and over and over again, and you can just see the career criminals and just start to lose hope for even them. Like, there's no hope for them. But in my faith, there is no one that is so far beyond hope and beyond hope in Jesus. And your perspective changes. And I just get so excited about first responders that begin living out their faith at work. It changes everything. I mean, they are some of the bravest, most courageous people in this country that I've had the honor to serve alongside. And then once they surrender their lives to the Lord, it's just exciting to see, like, on fire for the Lord, watch what God can do through them. because they're already going into the darkest corners of the communities. They're already
Sure.
serving them well before any pastors or social workers or anyone else in the community is. These first responders have access and opportunity to share hope in the most hopeless
Mhm.
places in the community.
I know for many people in law enforcement and first responders in general, sometimes frequent flyers, especially guys, gals that are doing really heinous stuff, they're called a POS, you know, and when you have the life of Christ in you, you begin seeing these broken people as broken people, human beings who are just broken, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Was that the way you experienced that?
Yeah, absolutely. And another example, as I got more and more involved in my church and some men's groups and different things like that too, where I do think that among first responders, it's great to start a Bible study among other police or among other fire, those that get it and those that understand, because otherwise it's sometimes hard to connect in your church. But at some point, like where God started to grow me so much more is when I got connected to a group of men that were not in law enforcement, and they were able to challenge me and help me grow even more in my faith. And out of doing that, I actually started volunteering for our church's men's addiction recovery program.
Mhm.
And they had a house called the Damascus House, and it was a year-long program that they would live in the house and discipleship program. And I'd go weekly to their Bible studies. And for me to serve as a police officer and to now also come alongside their Bible studies, like they were seeing another side of a police officer
Mm.
that then some of those men had seen previously. Um, and just an opportunity to say, like, I'm no different than you guys. I need Jesus just as much as you guys do. I'm just here, to support you all, but to learn and grow, as much as you are. And I think it went a long ways with them. And there was just some cool stories that even came out of that. Like, again, your perspective changes. There was one guy that had just moved to the Seattle area to this program from North Carolina. And he had a double take because the second he saw me, he said that I looked exactly like the last police officer that arrested him, and thought I was there showing up, for him. But then I got to know him and hang out with him. And we actually had a bunch of those guys over monthly at our house for a barbecue. And, they, after some time, dubbed it the Cops and Robbers, Bible study, So again, it changes your perspective, and it gives you an opportunity to speak into some people's lives and encourage them and offer hope in a way that that they may not have heard before.
Yeah, this reminds me of this podcast episode I had a couple of weeks ago with Detective Tony Godwin. And he tells a story about when he first kind of committed his life to Christ and how he met a guy at church that hated him because Tony had arrested him twice before.
Mm-hmm.
And now, years later, now they're best friends. They hang out together, they do things together. So that's the power of, lives that are changed by Christ. And so if you want an interesting interview or conversation about that, go check out that episode. It's episode 73 on the podcast. And it's just a really fascinating story there that I really love hearing. So all of this has led you to now develop this national organization that you have created, and with the help of other people around you. Tell us about Mission First Alliance. What do you guys do? What's your focus? What's your mission? And for those of you who are watching and listening, if you have any questions for Jeremy, please put it in the comments here on YouTube, and I'll be sure to address those as we wrap up the program later this hour. So Jeremy, what propelled you? What is your mission there for Mission First Alliance, and what do you guys do?
Yeah, I think it was really just me seeing the struggle for Christian first responders that feel isolated and alone. And then coming alongside a chaplain and overseeing a chaplain's program, and then getting involved in some local and national Christian ministries, serving first responders like the Navigators First Responder Ministry and the Fellowship of Christian Peace Officers and the Billy Graham Law Enforcement Ministry, and seeing that there's amazing organizations and resources out there. But seeing that many are doing it alone, that they're doing it with very little collaboration amongst each other, very little encouragement or support, amongst each other. And then most first responders and families not even having the awareness that those resources are out there. And almost the same thing among chaplains, and same thing among churches that have a heart for them too. So it really is kind of just out of that, then this idea of an alliance had been talked about among some ministry leaders for a few years. But just the idea of, can we set up a Christian alliance for organizations, nonprofit or for-profit, for chaplains, for churches that have a heart for first responders, for Christian first responders or spouses themselves, like all to be connected, and more united for a purpose. And really our heart is to be uniting and equipping all who have a heart to reach them for Christ. So we just want to be providing the space where they can come together for collaboration, for encouragement, for support. And then on the back end, for us in the Alliance, how we can support them all to be more effective for God's kingdom in their organizations that they're running and leading, or in still serving, actively serving and living out their faith on the job. And so with that, we're just doing as many things as we can to provide the space. We're doing 2 virtual gatherings per month on Zoom on the first and third Monday night of every month. We're doing 3 leader summit retreats for leaders and spouses to be able to attend for a few days and get away and unplug and connect with other leaders. And then we're doing a national networking conference, which we'll do our second annual national networking conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee in September, the 18th to the 20th, as a 2-day networking conference. And all of these events are far more geared towards building relationship, learning from each other, and collaboration just among leaders. And so even like our national networking conference or leader summit retreats, we're setting it up so that it's more leaders learning from leaders. It's not teaching driven. It's not speaker driven. Like most conferences, there's just one speaker after another. Even our very first conference that we did last September, where we had over 100 come in from 20 different states, I shared with everyone at the conference that almost everyone attending would have been the people I would have paid good money to go listen to. And just to be at a conference with that many leaders that are excited to network and collaborate with each other, just want it to be that leader-driven conference where we can all come and learn from each other and encourage each other. We don't need to just listen to speakers. So that's really the heart behind what we're doing, and then just offering as many connections. We have membership, which is free. We have a free online membership application on our website. Anyone can become a member. We have a short statement of faith and just tell us a little bit about the organization or chaplain or church or them as an active or retired first responder. And in 2 years, we already have over 160 members in over 30 states and Canada and South Africa. So God is just
So it's an international organization
already. Yes. God is growing. Our MC for our next conference that's coming up in Chattanooga is a police sergeant in Ontario, Canada, and he is a leadership development sergeant in their department, and he is an amazing leader. And again, yes, excited that this is growing because the same issues among first responders are the same all over the world. And there are so many leaders that the Lord is raising up and uniting right now, which is exciting to see.
And I'm sure for the people who attend your twice monthly Zoom calls, it's probably really encouraging to connect with other people who are of like faith, right?
Yes. I can't tell you how many stories I heard as I was starting to get involved in ministries from first responder and ministry leaders that were just discouraged. And again, I feel like they were isolated. They were doing it alone. They were trying to do it, just not connected to the body of Christ, not connected to others. As one example, there was one police officer and bivocational pastor in Texas. There's another one in the Chattanooga area that I knew active as a police officer. And for years and years and years of doing ministry to first responders, after years of it, I've heard them, them and others say that they're just done. They're done. They're discouraged. They're not seeing any fruit. They're not seeing, people, especially police officers, receptive, and just discouraged. And I really feel like that discouragement comes and is so easy when we're isolated. And now with this alliance, I'm seeing like a renewed encouragement and excitement and focus, for the work that God's called them each to do. One quote from Travis Yates, who is former law enforcement himself. When we first started this, I just, kind of shared this as a vision, and he gave this quote to me, and we have this up on our website. And he just said that there's nothing more urgent today than the need for a gospel-driven alliance to serve first responders. After 30 years in the profession, I understand that without the gospel, we're simply putting a Band-Aid on issues that will never go away. Mission First Alliance is our opportunity to place the much-needed synergy behind the all-powerful gospel of Jesus Christ. And I feel like that is what we're starting to see, is just that synergy of just leaders that are being reinvigorated and excited and renewed as they're doing it together and not feeling like they're doing it alone.
Yeah, because that can be really super discouraging if you feel like you're all alone. And we know that that is a tactic of, the enemy of our souls to separate us and to divide us and to keep us, to make us think we're the only ones, and so many times, in my work with first responders around the country who are struggling with PTSD, PTSI, that's often the first thing they say. I thought I was the only one. In fact, in my film, several people, I was the only one dealing with this. And so if you're a person of faith, that kind of thing is no respecter of persons, and if you feel that you're the only one, that is really discouraging.
And I would add to that too, that churches across the country and great churches with great pastors that have great intentions and have a heart for first responders, many churches have pushed out first responders or not understood the culture or not understood how to support and encourage not only the first responders, but their spouses and their families too. And so even the Christians that attend churches, I've heard it so many times that they essentially felt pushed out, they felt isolated, or they felt unable to get connected in their churches. Because even if you think, and we had Jason Sawtell on our last monthly line Zoom.
I missed that. I saw he was going to be on. I was traveling at the time and couldn't join. So
and that was some of our discussion. Some of what he was sharing is, as a police officer, as a firefighter, if your church is telling you to get connected, to get into a small group, to join a life group, to get connected, or a Bible study. But you're attending as a police officer or a firefighter or a spouse of one, and you're trying to get connected in there, and everyone else is sharing, their highs and their lows and their challenges. You can't, you can't share that you just went on an infant death. No one else is going to understand, or relate, or you can't. So if you just even think about even our churches in our country, that may not understand the culture of first responders, which is why I have been saying for the last couple of years, I feel like our nation's first responders are one of the greatest unseen mission fields in our country today, because I do believe it is a culture of its own. And I do believe that many of the churches that do love them and support them and want to reach them don't understand the culture and don't know how to support them. And so, it's easy for Christian first responders to very quickly become isolated and alone. In their communities, in their churches, in their departments, and unsure of how to live out their faith. Because again, I think there's still so many misconceptions. You work for a government agency, and there's separation of church and state, and you can't talk about this, and you can't do this, and you can't, so they just they're essentially told that they can't. How, yeah.
Yeah, I love what Saddleback Church has done out in Orange County, California. They actually launched a ministry for first responders, a support group for first responders on their campus. I mean, it's a large church, huge, one of the mega churches in the country. And the launch of it, I was really honored to be there because they showed the film PTSD 911 as part of their launch. And now they have, I think weekly meetings, sometimes on Zoom, sometimes in person. They're on campus. In fact, actually Darren, who kind of hosts this, he's a firefighter, retired now from Orange County. He said, sometimes if we're on campus, we have to close the door because other people in the building don't, they hear language that they're not used to hearing at church,
Yeah.
And he said, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Because we
And
want to welcome all these first responders in.
Yes. They need to be. Jesus met people where they're at. I mean, I think that's the point of the gospel, is to meet them where they're at, but if you can't do that, or you give them the impression that they've got to be cleaned up, or they have to, change who they are, or their language, or all these things, then you're not meeting them. There are some amazing things that churches are doing all over the country. Our church here in Cleveland, Tennessee, and a bunch of churches I know in the Portland and Oregon and Seattle and Florida areas have set up what they'll call like rest stops. They'll set up a room inside the church 24/7 that can be available and access, to this room, to a restroom, to write reports, to take a break, for especially law enforcement. And it's starting to just like open the doors, or the first responder group. Same thing at my church. We host a weekly small group for first responders and spouses. And again, it's just, how are you meeting them where they're at?
Yeah, that is so important. And if we look at the story of Jesus, and I don't know if you have been following the Chosen series that's out there. You can see it all on Amazon. It's amazing and it's a story kind of behind the scenes of Jesus' story, Jesus' ministry, but how he addressed people just exactly. I mean, he hung out with people that a lot of Christians, quite frankly, don't want to hang out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And isn't that what people of faith, Christians, are called to do?
Yes. And then back to my point, like I love when a Christian first responder starts to live out their faith boldly. Now they are interacting with people that the church probably is not interacting with in their community.
Sure.
And they have an opportunity, again, to share hope in that community in the darkest places. And so I get excited about this as an unseen mission field because, again, there is no research, but a number of the ministries I've been a part of believe it's probably less than 10% of our nation's 4.6 million first responders that are Christians living out their faith. Mm-hmm. So it is a huge unseen mission field there. But then even through those first responders to the communities that they're serving, it is an amazing ministry opportunity. And there are so few police and fire and medics and first responders that I've talked to over the country, but there are some that will say that they see it as their mission field. Every single 911 call they go on. And again, like back to living out your faith, it changes your perspective on everything. And now it's not just like I'm taking in trauma and I'm being impacted by the job. It's no. Like I have an opportunity to impact the community and the world around me in a positive way. I mean, you see the light that should shine through us into the darkness. But how many people's lights are just dim to dull to dark? I mean, they've got no light shining through them, but you have an opportunity to shine brightly. I know that in Seattle, like I had opportunities over and over again where it just felt like it was a spiritually dark place. And I feel like God was using that to grow me in my faith and grow me in my perseverance. I mean, there were so many examples to where it felt like so much more challenging, almost more oppressing, to living out your faith. I mean, even after the riots, the Billy Graham Law Enforcement Ministry wanted to do an appreciation dinner for law enforcement in Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis after the riots. In my position, I was able to invite officers on the department and their families, send out an email, as we do for many other opportunities of supporting events and organizations. And so sent out an email department wide to invite the officers to be able to attend on their own time. It was a free event. And on that same day, there was another email that went out department wide encouraging officers to recognize Ramadan. So same day. But the only email that caught any criticism was my email, department-wide for the Billy Graham Law Enforcement Appreciation Event. And the city council president immediately caught wind of it, probably leaked to her. And she put out a public statement saying that this is a far-right extremist anti-LGBT organization, and this event should be condemned and no Seattle police officer should be allowed to attend this. and encouraged the mayor and police chief to make similar statements, of which both the mayor and police chief immediately made similar statements same day. And police chief said that this invitation has been rescinded. And everyone in the department was like, well, what does that mean? It wasn't even your invitation. This isn't just for the Seattle Police Department. This is not even being hosted in Seattle. This is an event for officers and families to be able to attend on their own time, separate, not in uniform, away from the department. And, so again, like there is that kind of oppression, and I think, and challenges for first responders to understand how to live out their faith. Yet, if you live out your faith the way I see in the Bible, like that should be your first priority, your first identity, your first of everything. And everything else flows out of that through that. And this is now just the job that I work, and it could be a different job tomorrow, but this is just the job I work, but that's not who I am. That's not my identity. And that's where we came up with the name Mission First Alliance, because I love how mission driven first responders and military are. And I love that military phrase, mission first, people always. But what I've recognized is that most first responders take on that identity of protecting and serving and doing the job in the uniform and the badge and who they are and what they do as their identity, rather than their identity rooted in Christ and that being their first mission. And then this is just what God's called them to and how they serve and how they live it out.
Without getting into a political discussion, it just baffles me how, one group like the Muslim community can be so well received, and they live out their faith first. I mean, they pray, they stop and pray 5 times a day. And I'm sure officers, I've seen officers who are of Muslim faith, and they wear the accoutrements of their faith, and no one says anything about that. And there's no criticism. But you put on Christ and you follow Christ's teachings, then there's immediate criticism and put downs, and it's frustrating. But I guess, didn't Jesus say that that would happen?
To expect it?
Yeah.
Yes. I think that on that same note, in the Seattle area where the COVID shutdowns, were very prevalent, including churches, and many churches shut down for months. My church that I had attended for 11, 12 years included, just virtually and, streaming their services for a number of months. But one of the first services when the church came back to attending in person, and they actually attended in the parking lot, so they didn't have to have the same, social distancing inside the church and to limit the people. The verses that my pastor was preaching on, which have stuck with me to today, because I think that the challenges that people faced in 2020 have really challenged people to get off the fence and to live out their faith, which is one of the things I'm excited in the first responder community, is I believe that first responders are searching for hope with wellness and with, just support and, in recognizing the need for it, but they're searching. And the verses that he shared have stuck with me to today, and they were from Jeremiah 17. 7 and 8. And he said, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream, and it does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and it is not anxious in the year of the drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit." And I feel like you could just see that play out in 2020. And there were many people that fell away from the church, and some have never returned to, churches. But in that same time where that felt like there was an oppression and that felt like it was more challenging to live out your faith, there were Christians that I could see that were not diminishing, and they were still continuing to thrive and probably having a greater impact in that season than any other time. And it's like that, but it all comes from your solid foundation in Christ, your solid foundation on the rock. And which is, for me, when it goes back to like that resilience and wellness and training, all of that, You have to have that solid foundation before the critical incident happens, before that personal challenge in your life happens. If you have that solid foundation and your roots are deeply rooted, it doesn't matter when the heat comes. You're not going to fear it, and you're not going to continue to cease to bear fruit. Like, you're going to continue to live out your faith and thrive even in the midst of those challenges, which again was like so encouraging to me, but also encouraging to recognize, like, that's who I need to be before the storm, before the crisis, before all of that. Like, human nature is, I'm good until I'm not good.
Right.
Now help me, Lord. But like that's not who God wants us to be, and we don't have to be that.
Mm-hmm. I had a brilliant statement that I was going to say, and it just floated through my brain, which often happens a lot. I want to put you guys' website up on the screen here, and I encourage people to go to that website. Well, I know what I was going to say. So when you have these challenges like we just discussed, it's great to have connections with other people that are also going through that. And that's what the Mission First Alliance provides, those kind of connections, right?
Yes, exactly. I think that when you're back to feeling like we're alone, I feel like there's this statement of just alone, but not alone. We all feel alone, whether it's in, PTSD, whether it's in, trauma, whether it's in living out our faith, we all feel alone, but we're not alone. I think that's just a lie from the enemy. And again, yes, we want to make those connections so that we recognize that we're not alone. We have that support. That is God's design through the body of Christ. I mean, I think sometimes we do that to ourselves, to isolate and not get connected in, our local church and our community and, with the support that we need. And just, it's our culture. I mean, we're a very self-sufficient, independent culture, and we go. And all of a sudden I'm going all by myself, isolated and without the support that God's intended and surrounded me with if I would just reach out.
In your experience, how did being connected to the body of Christ, being stronger in your faith, more reach in your faith, how did that affect you and in the area of mental health and wellness?
Yeah, I feel like, again, I think it's God's intention for us to be connected, for us to be supported, for us, to have that. And we need each other. And while I'm talking, I'll look up another verse too. We need each other. We need that support, that encouragement, that accountability. Because otherwise we can just get stuck in our own mind, in our own loop, in our own thoughts, which may not be true at all. Like a Romans 12:2, we're to renew our mind, daily. And so, like, again, where are we renewing our mind? What are we going back to as truth? Or for like an Ecclesiastes,
A cord of three strands.
Yes, is so much stronger together. So again, it's like you see it over and over in Scripture, but we just don't do it. And then in the first responder culture, it's a culture of strength, and we don't show weaknesses and we don't talk about it. So again, we just start pushing ourselves towards that isolation over and over and over again. And so I think when it comes to mental health, if we are rooted in our faith, have our trust in the Lord, have our hope rooted in the Lord, our identity rooted in the Lord, and we're renewing our mind, in His Word, in the truth, and with others, like that is God's intention. And you see it over and over and over again in Scripture, where there are warriors, David as warriors, David's mighty men as warriors, you see it. So it's not like, oh, they had it easy, no, like there were warriors that faced difficult things. And, David learned how to work through it, how to lament, how to, start with recognizing God and who He is first and foremost. And then, yes, in many times in the Psalms, in a raw way of, working it out in his mind, but then always circling back to, but God, but God, I trust you, but God, I love you, but God, I recognize who you are and who I am in, in relationship to you. So I do believe that our faith rooted in Christ plays a huge part in our mental health.
So I have a question that came through from Off-Grid Living. And this is what they say. What do you see as the role of a department peer support leader in connecting responders to Christian ministries? And what's a good first step to start doing that well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think with this wellness movement, and as we started developing a wellness unit in the Seattle Police Department, there are so many things being offered now, and so many good things and good resources and good things. But one of the things that I didn't like seeing is that many of them seemed like they're the end all be all. Like, if we just have a yoga program in our department, everyone's going to be good, and or mindfulness, or physical training, program, or whatever it is. And one of the things that I loved is some of the perspectives looking at it holistically. We are mind, body, and soul. So how are we mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, tactically, being supported? And so I loved the approach from a wellness perspective, of almost like casting the net. I don't want to just say this one resource or this one thing offered is a wellness program. We need to have good counselors and therapists and resources and programs and stuff for families and marriages and finances and all these things offered, and good Christian resources as well. Because even the programs that try to become, holistic, and we're going to look at all this and we're going to offer all these resources, even still, many of those programs, I see the Christian resources pushed to the side, or the chaplains pushed to the side. And, oh, that's just the chaplain thing. And I think that chaplains are a good resource, but most first responder leaders don't understand the role of a chaplain. Most departments and peer supports don't understand the role of a chaplain. So they just let the chaplain be the chaplain, and the chaplains most times aren't integrated into the department, aren't trusted, aren't respected, aren't really there as a resource. So when it comes to this, I just think that, like you're offering all these other resources, the Christian resources should be offered too. And many times I just think that they're not. And so for any department too, I'd love for them to be aware of this alliance, because we have an alliance directory with resources, Christian resources all over the country. Some of them are national, some of them are local. There's amazing resources all over the country that most agencies, most first responders, most families just aren't even aware they even exist. So that's
how do you deal with senior command who is like really just anti-Christian and just doesn't want any of that to be a part of their agency?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think that with peer support, with wellness, with Christian ministry, it is patience and waiting on the Lord's timing. Even in my role being a full-time peer support coordinator, there were a whole bunch of departments that would come to us and ask for advice and for guidance on how to start a peer support team or a wellness program. And they had great, like a police officer or a sergeant that was very excited to start this program. And then I would hear them circle back and say, the chief just, has shut it down, is not allowing us to start the program, and I saw that over and over and over again. So really, I feel like, and there were so many ideas, even in the Seattle Police Department, that myself and my partner, the two of us as full-time peer support coordinators had, but we would put forth, and it, like the brakes were pumped. So we just had to be patient and wait on God's timing. And again, like I feel like, 10 plus years, God was just growing me in like that patience and perseverance. So I would just say, start with prayer, and trust God's timing, that God would open up those doors. And I did see that there were some that were resistant to either mental health or wellness or peer support or Christian resources, that in God's timing, some of those leaders moved to different positions, different departments, moved in different ways. And then the door was open with the next leader that stepped in. So I think that first responders by nature are very reactive. I mean, just think about it. All the calls we respond to, we respond when things happen. We're very reactive. Inside the police departments and fire departments and first responder agencies, they're no different. And when it comes to all this mental health and wellness stuff, the chiefs and leaders are just removed enough that they aren't aware of the need to the gravity it is a need. And so it's really sometimes not until something happens that then they say, oh, wow, we need to do something about this. And I could go on and on with examples. One of them was in the Seattle Police Department when we had an officer attempt suicide, did not immediately pass away from his suicide attempt, was on life support for 2 days. At that time, the chief put out an email department-wide saying that there was an officer in critical condition, and had alluded to harmed himself, but didn't name the officer because at that time, not everyone had been notified. Our chief heard over 20 names in 24 hours of, was it this person? Was it this person? Was it this person? Wow. And at that time, it was almost like, I think, a wake-up call, like, oh, wow, are there really that many people in our department that people are concerned about that it could have been? So again, like, it takes a line of duty death or a suicide or an officer involved shooting or sometimes things for it to really go somewhere and start. And I'd say it's the exact same thing with Christian, ministries, and living out your faith and wanting to see it grow more is it's God's timing. It's not our timing. The thing that encouraged me the most when I was coming alongside the chapter leaders with the Fellowship of Christian Peace Officers all over the country, what just kind of resonated with me is, God's called us to be faithful and obedient, and the harvest belongs to the Lord, and the fruit belongs to the Lord, and the timing belongs to the Lord. So like God, my role is to be faithful and obedient and live out my faith when and where I'm at and with what's before me. And just, I have to trust the rest to the Lord.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I can't believe it's already been almost an hour. And I want to wrap up with, so give people a place to go. Where can they learn more about your organization and about what you guys do, and how can they get involved?
Yeah. Our website, missionfirstalliance.com, all spelled out. And on the website, you can just join the Alliance. We have a short membership application. Contact us directly, get our emails, learn about what we're doing. The last thing I didn't say is for everyone that joins what we're doing, we offer it for free. Our National Networking Conference is free to attend. Our Leaders Summit retreats are free to attend. We just want to love and support and serve and encourage and connect all of those that the Lord is raising up. And God is stirring in active and retired first responders. God is using the ministries and the organizations and the resources. God is stirring up churches and pastors to see the need. And God is moving, I think, like through this synergy, through these leaders. The last verse that I would say, and kind of our theme for this year, is just ignite. From 2 Timothy 1:6, for this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. And then it goes on to say, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. But just that idea of fan into flames the gift of God, and for God to ignite that in the active and retired first responders and the leaders and all those that are trying to support them is just exciting. So yeah, go to our website, contact us directly. We'd love to connect you and support you all.
Yeah, and talk about this national networking event and conference.
Yeah, September 18th to the 20th. The first night on a Thursday will be a big kickoff event on a Thursday night with live worship and emergency vehicles locally and appreciating local first responder families. Just a fun event on that Thursday night. And then it'll be a 2-day national networking conference on Friday, September 19th and Saturday, September 20th, free to attend. Just you'd have to pay for your own travel and lodging, but just come and join us. We'll have room for 240. Last year we had a little bit over 100. I think that we will fill fill the 240 based on what I'm hearing and who is already wanting to come and signed up from all over the country and Canada, and a pastor from South Africa already. I'm just excited for, again, this to be a time of leaders connecting with leaders, this to be a leader-driven conference. Like, I'm not going to advertise keynote speakers, because really, I think almost everyone attending could be keynote speakers. So come and sit at the tables and have tabletop discussions and just have time building relationships with leaders all over the country and be encouraged by what God is doing all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. Well, Jeremy, it's been great to get to know you over the last couple of years, and just to call you a friend. It's a privilege, and what you guys are doing is amazing, and you're doing God's work. And I want to just encourage you to keep it up. And for anyone who's watching or listening, reach out to Jeremy and his team there and be a part of that and learn and grow. And I look forward to attending this conference myself in September. So I can't wait to be there. Any final words for our first responders out there?
No, just be encouraged, stay in the fight, seek after the Lord. And I just appreciate the opportunity and what you're doing. I'm excited to see you at the conference too.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that is going to wrap us up for today. This hour went by so quickly. It's hard to believe it's already been an hour. So we want to kind of stick to that. And so, Jeremy, thank you again for being here and for being a part of this. And stick around after I log off, and we'll wrap up offline. But for the rest of you, thanks for following along. And we're going to post this live to the world probably on Monday. So share it out there with the world so they can see. And we'll also post it on the audio version on the podcast itself next week as well. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And Jeremy, thanks for being here. And you guys all take care. And remember that wellness is not optional. It's an important part. If you want to succeed at what you do, take care of yourself and take care of your spiritual life. That is the most important. Again, thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Hey, it's Conrad again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around. Be sure to leave a review and a 5-star review if you believe it's worth it, and share it with your tribe. Hey, if you are a first responder leader and you are part of the peer support team or part of the wellness team, or if you're not any of those, but you care about wellness and you care about your organization's wellness, I encourage you to check out our website, ptsd911movie.com, and purchase the PTSD 911 documentary for your organization. It is a powerful, powerful tool to help jumpstart that conversation about mental health and wellness within your organization. It's been used by nearly 150 agencies and organizations around the country, including some very small departments and some very, very large organizations and departments around the country. They're using it in training, you're using it at the academy, they're using it in their peer support training, and so you too can use it. And there's prices there for smaller agencies and for larger agencies. So go to ptsd911movie.com/toolkit and learn all about it there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and thank you for checking it out. And if you're in one of our cities where we're coming to a live event, I welcome you to come join me and see me there. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.